If you want to know how to market your indie game successfully on Steam, then the page for last day of June should be a case study. Impressive screenshots and expressions like "poetry in motion" and "empathy through experience" pushed a lot of my buttons, and it all made me genuinely interested and excited to play the game. This page alone was the only piece of exposure I needed before I added the game to my wishlist and kept it on my radar. The game is reportedly inspired by Steven Wilson's song and music video Drive Home, and after watching only a few seconds of the video, you'll quickly see where the similarities lie. The concept of adapting a music video into a game is completely new to me. The only other game that kinda fits that description is Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. But I don't think that's a fair comparison, because Last Day of June does more than enough to craft its own identity from its source material, even if it's occasionally hamstrung by that creative decision. The game starts with a charming opening sequence that introduces Carl and June, a couple who love nothing more than taking it easy and being in each other's company. You'll get to experience all the ups and downs of going on a romantic picnic together. You'll fetch a blanket, exchange gifts, and even run from the rain together. Oh, we've all been there. And you'll be surprised how quickly you develop an emotional attachment to these characters after only spending a few minutes with them. It all seems a little bit too happy though, and surely enough, a sudden time skip occurs and we see Carl alone in a wheelchair. June is nowhere to be found, and clearly something terrible has happened. That night, Carl experiences a phenomenon that offers him a chance to go back in time in a bid to reverse the events of the past through a series of portraits left behind by June. By going through specific character paintings, you can rewind time to experience June's last day from their own unique perspectives. You'll see what they got up to during the day, and by changing key events of their routine, you work to prevent the tragic outcome of that evening. It's an interesting setup that'll quickly get its hooks into you. Even though you've only been with the couple for a short while, you will feel emotionally invested in their tale. The lead up to the core gameplay isn't communicated very elegantly, but if you persevere, you will eventually get to grips with what's happening, and fortunately things do come together in the third act for an ending that plays all the right notes. The thing that'll knock your socks off though are the stunning visuals. The team developed a custom-built marmalade shader to achieve the watercolour effect, and aside from winning the award for the greatest shader name ever, it lends a real vibrancy to the colour palette that perfectly captures the mood of a warm, drawn-out summer evening. I was actually a little taken aback by how good it all looked at first, and I spent a fair old while watching the tiny details slide into focus when you approach them, or looking at the light shafts that trickle in through the leaves on the trees. While the characters have creepy faces that kinda give off an early Tim Burton vibe, the style eventually becomes endearing. They're all animated really well too. You can't not love the way that the hunter runs about or how Carl climbs stairs. Even though they only speak in sim speak, it's surprising how well they can emote with their body language alone. Even without facial expressions, there's just enough here to convey a nuance that carries an emotional weight. On the Steam page they make a big deal about the game's music, and while Steven Wilson's tracks are very good in isolation, some pieces don't quite fit the scene. Take this moment for example. It's not just me, is it? Because this doesn't quite fit. The composer for the game also did the track for the original music video, but the tone of the game is Winnie the Pooh in comparison to the source material. They stuck a little too close to the music video with this one, and in a way, that's a recurring theme with some of the other issues with this game. It hasn't made the transition from music video to game as smoothly as it could have, and that's most evident in the core gameplay. In order to save June, Carl must inhabit the past through his neighbours and make sure they're all doing the right actions at the end of the day. This is often governed by what items they have access to within their timelines. In one example, there's a piece of rope that the child can use to make a kite, or the woman can use to tie her luggage onto the car. Problem is, both people need this rope to avert the tragic accident. You'll find yourself replaying chapters to free up certain items, so it all turns into a juggling act where you have to manage several timelines until you get the perfect sequence. The puzzles aren't hugely challenging, but they do something fun with the idea of time travel at least. Each character you control solves puzzles or opens up pathways using their own unique abilities, but I've already made that sound a lot more exciting than it actually is. The kid can kick balls to move pots, the hunter can shoot birds, but best till last, this lady has a box she carries around with her. But before you can even open your own front door, you need to learn how to put it down, open the door, then pick it back up. It's riveting stuff. Playing as her is exacerbated by the fact she refuses to walk across a pile of leaves while holding this box. It's baffling, it really is, especially after you reverse engineer the situation. She's packing her car to move out, and the shortest route is littered with leaves, yet the car is already fully packed. Did all these leaves just suddenly fall while she was walking back for the final box? If not, then why didn't they bother her off camera? Honestly, these leaves bothered me a lot more than they should have, but they're emblematic of the triviality of some of your tasks because at times this game feels like it's been padded out to make it a longer experience. It's frustrating because you'll often know a solution to a puzzle, but you'll need to either do something mundane or sit through several minutes of guff before you can make progress. Routing back and forth between the many paintings eventually becomes tiresome, because when you do need to go back, you need to rewatch the same lengthy unskippable cutscenes over and over again, making replaying sections about as inviting as putting on a damp pair of socks. It's necessary, but hugely unpleasant. Outside of the main quest, there are several collectible memories scattered around the village that flesh out the backstories of the side characters, but they do the Donkey Kong 64 thing where you can only get a certain memory if you're playing as that specific character, which means even more time going back through the same cutscenes before you can collect them. The memories themselves are okay, but you'll feel like you already know each of the side characters' backstories just by looking at them. The most damning thing though is that when all is said and done, these side characters actually take away from the focus of the lovely arc of the main characters, and they can break the spell the game puts you under in its opening act. None of them are in the music video either, so they're clearly added as a means of bolstering the length of the game. While the game diverges a lot from its source material, in some ways the game can feel too faithful at times, and that stunts any opportunity for these side characters to be anything more than the vehicle for Carl. The emphasis of the story is on him and not his community. The worst part is, I actually quite like the idea of time travelling through the neighbours. It's a creative solution to flesh out the world and the story, but as it stands, their implementation feels underbaked and designed exclusively to put more game into the game. In fairness though, it must be really hard to adapt a 7-minute music video and stretch it out into a compelling experience that justifies the £15 price tag. For that amount of money, gamers expect at least a 2 to 3 hour adventure, and in this case it feels like the priority was on adapting the story rather than making the gameplay loop engaging over an extended period. That said, the new direction of the story is excellent, and if you're like me and fell in love with the two leads during the opening half hour, then you may feel obliged to see their story through to its powerful conclusion. Thinking back on it all a few days later, I remember the bittersweet moments between Carl and June that bookend the experience. Those are the moments worth playing for. Underneath all the pop kicking and slipping on leaves is a truly melancholic and touching tale about love, loss and fate. It makes for a surprisingly good companion piece with the Sexy Brutale, since they both do something very human with the concept of time travel. If you think you have the patience to see yourself through a patchy midsection, then The Last Day of June will break your heart in all the right ways.